So I am proud to be able to introduce to you the renowned keynote speaker, author, and motivator, Pete Thomas, winner of NBC'ss Biggest Loser. Pete Thomas uses a combination of humor, personal stories, and technical know-how to deliver his life-changing message. He speaks from experiences growing up in the foster care system due to his mother's mental illness, and it was an unstable environment that made him began his experience and struggle with weight. And then there he also learned the lessons that finally helped him succeed in overcoming challenges. Pete's a speaker that speaks at events for employers across the country, as well as conferences. And I would like to hand it over to you, Pete, and everyone enjoy Pete's story. And thank you so much for being a part of this session for us.
Thank you so much, Jenny, for having me. I appreciate it. From Ann Arbor, Michigan, the greatest city in the country. Go Blue. If you're not here, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Now, again, thank you so much, Jenny, there at Global Healthcare. You know, the work that you're doing there is not only valuable to our employees, but to our culture. So I appreciate you. Dr. Daniel Dowd there, gentleman, thank you for what you presented and what you've shared so far. I've got a great story I've got to share with you about my own mother, Michael Weiner there at Ernst & Young, Allison Stark at HP, and Charles Leverton at Nike. Thank you for what you're doing. You know, if I were working at one of your organizations, I would be in your program. So I thank you. Number one, I thank you for your service to your employees. Because the value that you are providing cannot be understated. You know, and also I look forward to Blake Cohen and Tori Davis. You know, specifically as they talk about addictions. One of my struggles, obviously, you can see from the picture back there. One of my struggles was with the food addiction, and I fundamentally believe in the power of individuals and corporations to not just change but to transform. Right? That's what I believe, that individuals and organizations can change and transform, and that's why I'm excited to share with you just a few minutes here about my particular story. I'm going to start a little bit different than I normally do. When about 75% of the time when I'm talking, I'm talking to your employees. I'm talking to people who were at the employee level. About 25% of the time, like now, I'm able to talk to leaders, and I specifically enjoy it from this way. I'm not going to share so much about how I gained the weight. From the standpoint of I obviously overate, but I'm going to share my mother's story, right? So my mother was a very highly intelligent young lady. She received a partial scholarship to Michigan State College, and that's before it was even a university. So we're talking back in the 50s. And in Michigan State College, my mom double majored in criminology and psychology. She wanted to go to law school. She was also on the fencing team. She was just an athlete and an incredibly smart woman. Didn't know much about her after I was born, and I'll tell you why. When my mom was in college, she was recruited to go into undercover narcotics work. They had a program here in the Metro Detroit area. They had a program where they would take students who were in college and employ them to buy narcotics undercover in the inner city. And she was recruited for that program. And being recruited for that program, unfortunately, she was discovered. The bad guys, as we would say, found out that she was working undercover, beat her to within an inch of her life, and left her literally on the doorstep of a hospital. Thankfully, they left her alive. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. They left her alive kind of as an example to what happens to people who work undercover. She was able to recover, but from that very moment, she had a chemical imbalance in her brain. Actually, historically in my family, mental illness runs in my family from those who've had some type of head trauma. I literally have an uncle who is in Michigan lore, University of Michigan lore, as the guy who did not score against Ohio State back in the 20s or 30s or 40s or something like that. He ended up developing a mental illness, which now is thought to be because of CTE, because of concussions. But in my family, there's this history of mental illness as it relates to head trauma, and my mom definitely went through that. Now, she was able to recover well enough to end up going back to school, and about 10 years later, I was born. I was born about 10 years after this incident. But it led to all kinds of struggles, When I grew up, I bounced with my mom in and out of foster care. My mom would literally abduct me from foster care. I'm going to share that story with you. And when we were together, we would go from place to place to place. And many times We would not have food to eat. Many times we were homeless, and it could all be traced to this mental illness, to this chemical imbalance in her brain. I'll tell you one story. This is the way, when she wasn't on proper medication, this is the way her mind worked. Her mind would go between these struggles of psychosis, right, and incredible intelligence. One particular time, I was about 7 or 8 years old. I'm living in foster care at this time because someone discovers that I wasn't being taken care of. They call the authorities, and I get whisked away into a group home and then a foster home. So, and I want you to see, I'm on a foster home, in a foster home on the east side of Detroit. And one school day, I'm out during recess, and I'm playing on the baseball field, and my mother appears. Now, my mother somehow had found out what foster care home that I was in. She found the exact home I was in. So this is where this brilliance comes through, right? She discovers the home that I'm in, and then she waves me down while I'm playing baseball with all of the kids my age. I'm whatever, 7th or 8th grade. I mean, 7 or 8 years old, whatever grade that is. And she signals me to go and hide behind the backstop. Hide behind the backstop until the other kids go in for recess. So that's exactly what I do. And then she calls me across the street. We hop into a cab, a waiting cab, go to the airport, and we fly to Washington, D.C. So here I am, I'm in Metro Detroit. By that evening, I'm in Washington, D.C. So the brilliance of her mind to concoct this plan, to lay everything out, to have the schedule there, her mind was incredibly brilliant. Now we get to D.C., and within 3 months, we're homeless. Within 3 months, we're bouncing all over the place from location to location. We're traveling up on Greyhound. I can remember traveling to Norfolk, Virginia, where we literally spent the night in the Greyhound bus station because we had no place to go. So you can see how this mental illness went back and forth between incredible brilliance to just utter near helplessness. And thankfully, I was swept away back into the foster care system. And by the time I was 13, 14 years old, I was adopted by some relatives. But the root, the pain of going through those incidences early in life, they had their impact. They had their effect on me. So here I am. I grow up. You got to understand, when I grow up and food is now available, normally, how do I respond? How do I react? Well, I react as if food were not around at all. And I began to overeat. And at my largest, I get up to about 416 pounds, 50% body fat, high blood pressure, diabetic, all of those different things. Going to Biggest Loser, we'll skip past the majority on that. The Biggest Loser was the impetus to me learning how to lose weight. But then I got home from the show. I lost 102 pounds. I lost 83 pounds while I was on the show, 102 pounds at home, so a total of 185 pounds. And then once the show was over, that's when I set these goals. My number one goal once the show was over was, I'm going to keep the weight off when the cameras were off. I'm going to keep the weight off when the cameras are off. So that meant I had to do some work. I had to do some study. I had to figure out why I had gained the weight. That's the first thing. There's this saying that it's not what you're eating, it's what's eating you. And that was true with me. So I had to start figuring out what exactly am I going to do to keep the weight off, because this was a reality show. This was a moment in time, and that moment in time has passed. So I started doing my research just for me, right? I went to the National Weight Loss Control Registry and started studying the people that were successful long-term. What was it that they had done? Now, I studied, exercise and nutritional science. I studied all those things, but the thing that I keyed in on the most was the psychology of change. Now, when I come into organizations, I take all of these principles and I as my buddy says, I limericize them, all right? I make them simple. So I have 3 principles. I'll say I learned how to master my mind. I learned how to manage my mouth, and I learned how to multiply my muscles, right? But when we peel it back, especially for those of you who are listening, who are really into the background and the research of it, I literally had to dig into the psychology of change more than anything. I had to deal with this mind of mine. And so that led me to a couple of different things. Number one, I discovered CBT. I had figured out certain things related to my habits, right? So I read up on everything related to habits. I literally went to Philadelphia, to the offices of Aaron Beck, the founder, the father of cognitive behavioral therapy, sat in seminar where I could learn about cognitive behavioral therapy firsthand from the founder of CBT. Now, this journey, of course, with those traumatic upbringings, that led me to, of course, to Bessel van der Kolk, of course, his book, my favorite book, is the body keeps score, and it talks about childhood trauma. From there, you look to the ACE, Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, which was the study that was paid for and promoted from Kaiser Permanente and the CDC, right? The roots of that study are in an obesity clinic, right? A doctor in obesity clinic, he's surveying people, and he discovers that those who were the largest, who failed the most, had some type of childhood trauma happen in their life. And so I'm studying these things to get really a picture of myself, to learn about myself. And then from there, I have to go to my mom, right? I have to go back to my own family history. Now, from the time I was about 14 years old until the time she passed away a couple of years ago, she literally lived in an adult foster care facility. She just struggled. She struggled to be able to maintain a regular life. And we just basically had no communication, no real relationship at all. And the interesting thing about it was she was on two major antipsychotics, Cogentin rather, is the proper pronunciation, I believe, and Prolexin. And the problem with this is when she was on these, there was no way to figure out what the dosage was that she should have, right? So there was no Genamine out at this time. There was no way for a doctor, besides trial and error, and I do mean trial and error, right? There was no way for a medical professional to figure out exactly what the dosage should be. You know, Bessel van der Kolk, he says in one of his interviews is that when it comes to mental illness, and he's really one of the founders he's a psychiatrist, of course, but one of the founders at helping people, you know, with these drugs that help with mental illness. One of the things he said is that the therapists have gotten away from being master diagnosticians, gotten away from that. And so what it means is it's just trial and error. You come in with some kind of presenting issue and you're given drugs. And so my mom, when she would struggle with this, I would go to visit her, and it would literally be three words. She would see me and she would say, "Hi, Peter," and then it would be a shutdown, because she was so medicated, we could not have regular conversation. Now, there were times where she would convince the staff, somehow she would convince the staff to take her off. And when she was taken down, she would be taken down too low, she would convince the staff, the medical staff there at this facility, that she was well enough to take care of her own self. They would let her out. This happened several times over the last 30 years. They would let her out of the facility, and she'd stay in a place where she could, you know, take care of herself. And within no time at all, she was homeless and back on the street. So I applaud you, Dr. Daniel Dow, for what you're doing there at Genamine. It would have helped me to have a relationship with my mother. It really would have. Now, for me, what I was able to do is I was able to do a lot of this self-discovery, right? And so this is what I say, really 3 quick keys to my own personal transformation. And you should recognize these. If you're listening, you'll recognize some of these things from our panel who have been sharing some of the things that they do with their employee wellness program. Number one was, for me, what I had to do was self-assess, right? I had to figure out, where am I emotionally at any moment in time? Where am I? In other words, what we're talking about is emotional intelligence, right? I have a very high degree of self-awareness. One of the things when it comes to weight, of course, people talk about they emotionally eat, right? Well, I had to develop a very high degree of self-awareness, of emotional intelligence. I had to manage even my media usage. You know, the media and political environment right now is incredibly negative, and that has an effect on us from a mental health standpoint, right? So number one, I had to constantly be in this place of self-assessment. Number two, what I had to do is I had to find models to mimic. Now, when I was on The Biggest Loser, that was easy. There were others like me who were going through the struggle and were, you know, really being successful. But once I came home, once I got off the Biggest Loser ranch, I had to find those other people around me. Now, that goes to the psychological principle of self-efficacy, right? If you want to be successful, you need to find someone else who is similar to you, who has been successful or who is navigating to success. And that gives you a boost, a confidence boost that allows you to be successful. And so what you've heard today is you've heard that very same thing from our panelists. Right? They talk about, you know, getting in these groups, and I applaud, I believe it was, who was that? I have to look at my notes, Google, with the certified listeners. Oh my goodness, I applaud that. They have, you know, these little a little sticker on their badge. If you need somebody to listen to, they're available, right? These people, having connection with other people who are like-minded or who have this level of empathy towards you was so key in my own success, right? That was so key in my own success. So number one was self-assessment. Number two was find models to mimic. Number three, I decided to work to help transform the lives of others. I'm a certified professional life coach, as well as traveling to organizations and speaking. And ironically, as a professional life coach, the majority of the people that I work with are entrepreneurs and business people, not even a lot of people on the weight side. So I applaud you all there. I applaud our panelists there for what you're doing within organizations. But here's the three keys: self-assessment, find models to mimic, and work to transform the lives of others. You've got to understand this, that once you have gone through something and you have come out the other side, as they say, being able to give back, being able to share, being able to facilitate a group or go into a group, is really key. I've been able to write a book and teach classes and all that. That's been one of those things that solidifies my success within me, is because I've started giving back. And so for those of you all who may be listening, I wrote down three keys. As I've traveled the country, I've wrote down three keys to a transformational organization. And I think you'll recognize some of these keys that have come from our panelists. And if you're in an organization, if you're in a company and you're looking to make inroads or make changes with your employee wellness program, I want you to consider these three keys. Number one, provide resources that eliminate the shame associated with our struggles and mistakes. All right, let me repeat that. Provide resources that eliminate the shame associated with our struggles and mistakes. Now, of course, our panelists, they call it a stigma, right? They call it a stigma. I call it the shame, because there's this internal dialogue that goes on. When I'm overweight, when I'm struggling, with my children, the internal dialogue is, what's wrong with me? That's already been discussed. You all have already talked about that so very well. But the internal dialogue, I call it a record that plays around and around and around. And the worst thing that can happen to you is for that record to be on autoplay, is for you to just think there's something wrong with you, to go from consciously thinking there must be something wrong with me, there must be something wrong, to that record playing over and over and over again without any of your help. So again, one of the keys is resources that help eliminate that shame. At EY Assist, it was already mentioned, those learning events, the videos, the discussion, HP rolling their program out globally, those certified listeners, Nike bringing everybody together to provide those resources. I mean, I applaud you all. I applaud you all for what you're doing there in terms of those resources. And then number two, the next thing is goals and opportunities to move individuals toward their greatness. What I mean by that is, I call it replacement theory. So if there's a struggle in your life, or any of your employees' lives, we don't just stop the behavior. All right, this is my belief. We don't just stop the behavior. What we have to do is we have to replace that behavior. So in replacing that behavior, what that means is a wellness program is typically, as I've observed, good wellness programs are well-rounded, right? They'll offer, for instance, fitness challenges so that people can really get out of the office and they can begin to exercise and feel the release of serotonin and endorphin levels, rising. They have a well-rounded, comprehensive program that points people upward and outward, all right? Outward, out from their inner issues and upward towards something higher goals. Real quick story. NASA astronauts, after they came back from the first couple of moon missions, they were found to be very discouraged and depressed. And as the research went on, they found that these astronauts, these highly intelligent, highly professional men were discouraged and depressed. Why? Well, they had achieved the pinnacle of human achievement. They had gone to the moon. What could compare to that? Absolutely nothing. However, the way that NASA was able to mitigate this discouragement was, as soon as they came back, right, and went through their detox program or whatever it is, as soon as they had their land legs again, they immediately gave them work that was important to do. So they focused them on different goals to start achieving different things, and that helped them to not be discouraged, to not be depressed. So right there in your organizations, a well-rounded wellness program will include things that allow people to not only deal with the mental issues, to not only deal with what's going on at home, but it will allow them to do exercise programs or community events where they're doing a Red Cross run or whatever it may be. That's the second thing that I see is really key for transformational organization. And the last thing, and I'll end on this, is the last key for transformational organization, as I see it, are opportunities for overcomers to assist others. That's been my story. You know, there's this great TED Talk. I forget the gentleman's name. Actually, Michael Brody, I believe is his name. It says, great leaders do what drug addicts do. And if you're an employer and you recognize that there are individuals within your organization who are struggling with different things, we've got to remember they aren't to be cast away. But if we can put them into a program where we can encourage them, number one, to eliminate the shame that's associated with their struggle. If we can, number two, provide resources, goals, and opportunities to move them towards greatness, to get them to think not only outward, but upward towards something different, right? Then they will turn around and they will be some of our greatest assets. So I again, applaud you all, those who spoke before me. I just applaud what you've done, because on point number 3, opportunities for overcomers to assist others. You've already discussed this. You've discussed how you have these peer groups, how you have the listing groups. You have these things. That's been one of the keys to my success. And I believe it's a key to human interaction. There has to be someone that not only can serve me and support me and encourage me, but that I can serve, that I can support, that I can help along your journey. Anyway, that's all I have. That's my time. Again, thank you so much, Jenny. This has been a great encouragement to me. It's helped me to remember the principles that I've been able to use to encourage others. And I just want to encourage everyone listening to think of your employees as they are, your absolute greatest asset. And as you help them to overcome, they will be an even greater asset to you and your organization. Thanks for the time, Jenny.
Wow, thank you for that. What a fantastic presentation, and some great tips for organizations to be able to truly transcend their programs from what they're currently doing to something much better. I love that you had 3 great takeaways. I was fast and furiously taking notes as we speak on everything you were saying. Just such a powerful speech. And for those of you that are joining us today, and for those of you that will join us during the replay, Pete is a renowned keynote. He will come to your organization and speak to your employees about this and other things related to mental health, related to overcoming obstacles, related to changing their health. And he's done this at our conference a few times, and he's done this around the globe for many different organizations. And I highly recommend the presentation. As you could see, in just 30 minutes, we had some amazing key takeaways, of all of which I think, are all things we can use immediately. So that's my favorite part about getting an event like this together, is being able to receive something that's going to make a difference. So Pete, thank you so much. It is a pleasure always having you here, and thank you for all of your great insight.